man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while, when will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right, welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you're first timer here. We got a fun-packed show as always. Our live navigation of patterns. We've got our San Pellegrino ready to go. We've got some Jordan almonds because somebody let me go to the grocery store by myself. Got my junkless cinnamon roll here. I got some Walker's shortbread cookies because they're excellent. And of course, I have some tea from the Table Rock Tea Company, which is good tea. And we're talking about value again. Again. It's almost like nobody understands value and we need to do it over. Almost. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster of a week. So we're searching for value. We're trying to find where is value. But it's been a journey because we did this value before, right? The what is value, and we're still playing with these monologues to some extent. Serious play, some might call it. I just call it play because there's no such thing as serious play. It doesn't make any sense. This idea of value is difficult to get your head around. So that's what we're going to cover. We're going to try to navigate the patterns into it. And sort of as an experiment, welcome to Navigating Patterns, where we go beyond the realm of the Lobster King, aiming for the mark of wisdom. And look, there was a great live stream that my good friend, Father Eric Seitz, puts on. And this one in particular was just wonderful from last Sunday. He does these Sunday live streams, and they're just, some of them are really fantastic. So if you haven't seen it, it's I think it's over on Randos United and on his channel. You should check it out. So I'll post the link here. That one in particular was really good. I had a really good time there, but I thought the opening really, it's really good. The opening talk on that one, and some of the subsequent conversations, just amazing. And the thing is, I found that interaction valuable, right? So notice what I said there, right? I found that valuable. So where is the value? And other people, of course, because I said, hey, did you see the open mic from Sunday? Because it was fantastic. You really got to listen to what Father Eric said at the beginning. It was great. They also said they found it valuable. And interestingly, I had a pretty miserable day yesterday in the middle of the day. And at the end of the day, there was somebody on the Discord server, somebody new I hadn't seen before. I was like, oh, there's this new person on my Discord server hanging out with Manuel. And it's like, wow, okay, well, that's good. So I got done with my meeting and jumped in there. And he said, hey, Mark, I've been watching your stuff and I really like it. And we talked for quite a while. It's a wonderful conversation. And, he said, I find your stuff valuable. I was like, what? Find value? Okay, interesting. And interesting, they would come up after we picked the topic of the live stream, which seems to happen an awful lot, strangely. So, having said all that, that's how we talk about these things. But value is not something that you find sort of lying around, hanging out, waiting for you. Hey, man, when are you going to find me? It's not a thing in the world. The value is not material. It doesn't materialize. It may have a material representation. You might call that a symbolic representation. Material itself might be imbued with value by virtue of any number of things. And value does not care about you, but it allows you to care. Isn't that interesting? And what you care about conveys value. And as you care more in that moment, more value is there. And look, I mean, we have talked about caring in a past live stream. So it's worth posting that link here. And you want to think about things like success. And we define success and reward using value. We expect, to some extent, to be able to use these things called values to help us navigate the world around us. Notice that values, and what is valuable are all different frames. They're different perspectives, different approaches with different purposes. In other words, each has a different telos. And that's important to realize. So we're using the same or similar words, and it's not some language game that we put a suffix on it or a prefix or slightly mangle the spelling. And the different telos of values, what's valuable, right? These different frames. Or with respect to us, right? The perspective is dependent upon us. You don't rid yourself of the perspective by taking a new one. You just switch one perspective for another. And that affects value. It affects where the value is, because asking where something is depends upon where something else is. Which is not to say there isn't an absolute frame, but even in an absolute frame, the reference of one thing to another matters. And so that's why it's important that you understand that success and reward, that value and what's valuable and what values are, is all frame dependent. And that's why we need orientation and navigation in the world. Having values allows us to orient. Valuing things is importance, and it is what importance is. Importance is wrapped up in value. And values change in the moment, in context, over time. This is not some straightforward sort of, oh, there's a value. I caught one on my fishing line. And look, I'm not answering your question. I know that, right? And so far, this has all seemed like a way of avoiding addressing the title of this live stream. So I appreciate you hanging in there, and we'll try to get there together in cooperation. But remember, I- I'm not here to give you answers, nice, satisfying, comfortable, scientific, precise, accurate answers. I'm here to give you ways to relate, to sense quality, to participate, to find right participation, or maybe good participation for you in and with the world. Or maybe the three frames: you with yourself, you with nature, you with others. That's what navigation is all about. And maybe your right participation is providing art. Maybe it's commenting on the video or commenting in the live stream. Maybe it's questions that you ask in the live stream or in comments on some of the videos. Or maybe it's just being a viewer. All of this is valuable and it's all required for the success of this live stream, of the channel, and of my wider project in general. And so you can look at two different modes of participation and say one's more valuable than the other. And that may be true. It may even be, we'll say, unconditionally true. But that doesn't mean there's no value in being a viewer. It doesn't mean that value isn't there in your engagement. Because ultimately, it's about the power that you do have, the proper, in my opinion, definition of power. Of course, I have a video on that, which is your time, energy, and attention. And that's what's valuable. How you allocate or spend or distribute your time, energy, and attention shows the value. When you pay attention to the TV rather than your child, whether you like it or not, no matter how valuable you tell your child they know the TV is more valuable, at least in that moment. And when we confuse value over time, and we always do, it's unavoidable. We often get into these conundrums, these little mix ups. That certainly happens. And so we need to be careful. Are we talking about value over time or value in the next 10 minutes or value for the first half of our life? There's Lots of ways to slice that. And it's mixed up in what is success? What is reward? What is rewarding? What is rewarding to you? If you do something that someone calls success and you don't feel you've gotten a reward, were you successful? Was it valuable? These are just questions, things to think about. How satisfied are you with the value that you received? Maybe you feel you're being underpaid. You can think about that in terms of feeling valued. And again, caring and value are wrapped up because caring is, at least in action, which is the only way I think you should think about it, all about time, energy, and attention. And you could say, look, the doctor's more valuable than the nurse for some things. That might be true. But maybe just having somebody sitting with you while you're sick is more valuable than the doctor or the nurse. And that's the tricky thing about value. Value in relation to what? And look, the re-enchantment of the world, and yes, I know the world is already enchanted and nothing has changed, right? But the re-enchantment of the world for people, for us, for humans, is all about reintroducing quality into the material world. And it's the quality part that's tricky. And we have to prevent ourselves from falling into the bad habit of trying to merely quantify or explain through quantity the entire world. Because science has shown us amazing success at things that nobody thought were possible, nobody suspected could be done because they violated some natural law or some words that were written down or some understanding that everybody's always had, some teaching that you participated in and believed in. So we tend towards this quantification, this dividing up, this discretization. Let's get everything into discrete parts. We can understand those parts. Maybe, but you've carved up the world. I'm not saying there isn't value in dissecting a frog. You get a lot of knowledge out of dissecting the frog and looking at the different parts and determining where parts begin and end and all of this nice quote Neoplatonic hint. There's no such thing stuff, but you can argue that now you know the frog, the one you dissected really well, and you participated with that frog in a way that is amazing and unheard of, right? But can't participate in the future of the frog. Frog's dead. You can't know other frogs in that way, and you can't know what that frog would have done had it not been dissected. You lose the quality of the frog. Re-enchantment is saying, hey, no one ever used to dissect frogs. If we wanted to know about frogs, we'd watch the frogs while they were frogging or whatever it is frogs do. I'm sure it's called frogging, though. Definitely a good science word. And that's the key to reenchantment, to understanding that you can only quantify so much about the world, and at a certain point, you're making it worse, not better. Not here to tell you what that point is, but it's worth knowing it exists and taking that seriously and participating in the world as if that exists. Because that's where value is. You know where value isn't? In the material. It's not there. It's not in gold. It's not in diamonds. It's not in dollar bills. Not in oil. You know how many other things have to exist before oil is of any use to anybody at all ever? No, you never think about that. No one ever does. And finding value, interfacing with value, embodying values, knowing what's valuable, all of that demands that we pay attention to quality. And yes, one child is more valuable than another in some aspect. No, you cannot choose one child over the other in any meaningful fashion. The captain of a ship is more valuable than the guy who climbs the rigging. There are fewer people who can be a good captain, and there are more people that can climb rigging. Still, not everyone can climb rigging. Not everyone that climbs rigging is good at doing it. And that matters. That also means that climbing the rigging is still valuable. The value doesn't go away because there's a greater value somewhere else. It doesn't have that quality. It's not a material thing. You can't go, oh, I'm going to take some value from here and put it over here, and then it'll have moved. No. But it does have a relativistic aspect. But it also depends on telos. Like, well, according to Aristotle, everything does. Final cause. But what you do in the world has value. And we can find value in participation, in action, in experience, which is past participation. And that's because you don't walk away from a participation with nothing. That's what experience is. It can be negative. Put your hand on the hot stove, burn your hand, negative experience. But it's an experience, and hopefully you learn from it, and maybe you didn't. But you probably did. Maybe you didn't learn the right thing from it. Maybe. And the value is still relevant in the experience because the engagement is not nothing. Having done something, by definition, is not nothing. And look, maybe your past participation is not relevant. Maybe it was a thing that didn't last. But we find the value in action, even if it's a past action. But past action is always less valuable than current action. And it's a conundrum indeed, right? This is a problem to some extent because now we have to work out that past action versus this current action, which one's more valuable and why, and what's going on. And this is wrapped up, this problem of value and experience versus value now is wrapped up in the quality issue. The past has a quality that is different from the present and the future. You cannot assign a quality to the past or present or the future that makes any sense in the long term. Sure, things can look valuable and seem to exhibit a way to become valuable. But is that thing actually valuable? Are things which don't reflect some eternal aspect valuable? I think not. This doesn't impact value changing over time. This is where we bleed over. Exaptability, learning, abstraction, these all play a role. Because once we do something, once we participate, once we take an action, that has an effect. That effect is not zero. And in that participation, there is a bleed through, a learning, an exaptation, a way that you relate differently in the future from how you did in the past. It moves you because you moved. Were you seeking value when you participated? And what value were you seeking? Because that'll determine how you moved. And then what did you learn from it? This stuff is not easy. You need to look up. And that's the problem, is that value is in the looking up. And you can't just look up, because then you can't act. It's a dance. And value is an abstraction of the world, of the material world. It impacts your attention and then it impacts your action. And also in that action, in that attention, you also create value. It's one of these nice reciprocal relationships. They feed each other, enhance each other, directed by your free will. And this value determines how much energy goes where and how much time you'll put in, or maybe should put into something like an action. And it's not the only factor. The complexity that we see in the world around us comes from competing, overlapping, cooperating qualities, which we call values. And these qualities move, they flow, they are not stable, but they are eternal. They are value. So, where are we looking for value? Where do we think we're finding value? What are the things we think are valuable? How are we valuing our relationships, the people around us, the things that we have? This is the highest value. Jordan almonds are great, at least for candy. And it is value and where you're looking that create the world. If you're looking for value in your victimhood, you're not going to have a great world. If you're looking for value strictly from other people, that might be a problem. If you have one value and it just never gets challenged by any other values, probably an issue. And that's part of the problem with value. Where is the value? Where are you interacting with value? Where are you finding value? What are you doing to make things valuable? And if you're not doing anything, are you increasing the value in the world or decreasing the value in the world? What are you trading your time, energy, and attention for? Video games? I can pay you money and you'll let me play video games. What a great deal. I'm not saying don't ever play video games, although, man, I haven't been playing any video games lately. Oh, except Hoplite. I did get addicted to Hoplite. It's quite a good game when you can't sleep and you need to calm down. Yeah, these things are tricky. Value is tricky, and values are tricky because they compete, they conflict, they change over time. You can tell what someone's highest value is by how they talk. And I have a talk called Highest Value about Sam Harris. Excellent video. It's one of my most watched. Quite a good video. And can see his highest value is knowledge. And you can see somebody else at the highest value of politics. And you can see the conflict there too. And that's important to know. That's important to realize. And your values change over time. How much video gaming should you do when you're a kid versus when you're an adult? Because I think those answers are different. How much time should be put into learning versus doing? Because that changes too. And it's the thing about values, they're slippery little puppies. So, what is it that you find valuable? And how do you enhance its value? Or do you? It's worth figuring that out for yourself. It's worth knowing, like, oh, the values that you have are those the values you're acting out in the world? Or better yet, what are you acting out in the world? Now tell me what you value. Because that's what I see. I don't see your fantasy in your head about your values. I don't see that. I don't have access to that. I'm a pragmatist. It's part of the reason for the where's value. Bringing things down. Look at what you're participating in. Look at what you're doing. Look what you're not participating in. 'Cause things you don't participate in, you don't find value in. Oh, I really care about the earth. So I fly around in a private jet. Really? I don't believe you. You can see what people value. You don't have to listen to them. You can just look at them. And here in the age of Gnosis, Substack coming soon. Here in the age of Gnosis, we listen to people. We put weight on their words. We believe the values they tell us they have because it's the age of Gnosis. But I don't think so. You believe what you act out, as Jordan Peterson says. Or just look at what people act out. You'll know what they believe. If they scream at the sky, it tells you something. You don't want to judge. They don't want to be judged. That's too bad. You have to act in the world. You're doing it based on values, whether you like it or not. You best know what those are. All right. Anybody who wants to jump in? I will post the link. Bang. Feel free to come on in and discuss whatever you'd like, although I prefer to stick to values, at least for a little bit. And that's sort of the key. Oh, some days YouTube makes me angry. There. On navigating patterns, I was able to pin the link. I can't pin the link anywhere. What is all these beer drinkers? Come on. Sam Powell, valuable. Beer is not valuable. I checked. I looked it up. I researched the stream exclusively and extensively. There was no beer listed as valuable. Beer has no value. Sam Powell, that's value. That's value. Junkless cinnamon roll bar, value. Jordan almonds, value. I can prove this. Jordan almond, action, more action. Value confirmed. No problem. Neutrino. I haven't parsed the details. The details of what? Oh, we went over this. Beer not valuable. Sam Powell, very valuable. William Branch, drinking Pellegrino, cherry, and pomegranate. There you go. That's some good stuff. Mills, is money a store of value? Well, I have videos on that, of course. I have video on the economy and 2 on money. Actually, the money ones are short. The problem with economics in general is that people reduce it to money and income. And actually, the only things you need to worry about are wealth and cash flow. It turns out that money and income are irrelevant. So people will point out, rightly, that the value of a currency, for example, money in this case, goes down with time because there is a time value of money. A lot of people don't know this. That's why cash flow and wealth are the 2 measures you want, and you want to ignore things like income and cash as such, like cash on hand, maybe. But it's weird that we think of it in those terms. Money represents future potential based on past performance. Roughly speaking, that's how money works. Keeping cash on hand is no good because cash devalues over time. So yeah, money is not a good store of value. Keeping money moving. Wealthy people keep their money moving. Just saying. Father Eric, welcome, sir. Uh-oh, he's got some heathen non-San Pellegrino drink, but we'll allow it.
It's Friday, so it should be a little bit penitential. So getting rid of some of the Michelob Ultra that somebody else put in my beer fridge.
Fair.
We're talking about money and value.
Well, the money is inevitably going to come up in the comments, so I'm well prepared. But yeah, I mean, money doesn't store value, right? Money's only valuable when it's transferred. Actually, there the great trick. So if you want a great trick, all you have to do is go back in history and look at the 1990s. Okay. The great trick that was played on the economy in the 1990s was the following. If you increase the flow of money, and they didn't do this, or at least they didn't do exactly this, but they did close enough to this. You don't print any more dollars or mint any more coins. So you keep the same number of dollars and coins in circulation. That doesn't mean you don't mint them, but it means for every one you mint, you destroy an old one, right? You then increase the speed of transfer of money in the system, and the economy will magically grow. And people don't. That happened in the 90s. Like, this is the Bill Clinton trick to some extent, right? So he expands the economy without increasing the goods and services being delivered in the economy. Not that they didn't increase, but they increased due to other factors like, the population increases, right? So if it doesn't increase more than the population increases, it didn't increase, right? Because it's all ratios. And people don't understand that. So, and it's mathematically known, right? Oh, in a system, you just increase the speed and suddenly a bunch of things change because the scale changes. Scale changes with speed, scale changes with size, scale changes with total potential, right? I think it changes with other things too, but those are the three that come to mind. And if you don't understand that, when you build a closed system, you can just increase the speed of something and bang, a bunch of stuff changes inside the system. And it looks dynamic when it's probably not. So one of the things they did was they sped up the transfer time between banks. And that automatically grew the economy at a ridiculous rate.
Because of computers?
Because of computers, well, they made some legal changes too. So electronic
okay.
signatures, that's the 1990s.
Oh, okay.
But then, and they did other weird things like so there used to be a rule in place that effectively said if there was fraud on your credit card, the credit card companies had to pay for that. And they were required to keep so much cash on hand for every credit card they issued. And that cash had to remain as cash on hand. So there was a big pool of cash that was on hand. That all got released by changing the fraud laws. So no, the fraud's on the consumer. It's like, wait a minute. How? Right. Well, and then what happens is, and now all of a sudden the consumer is required to fix the problem. Before, the liability was with the credit card company. Oh, you let somebody use my credit card and didn't check that it was me. Well, that's on you, dude. That's not on me. It makes total sense. So they flipped that around. So now all of a sudden you got LifeLock, where you get $1 million of insurance if somebody, you know what I mean? And then they put all these other laws in place to fix all the problems that were created by changing who's responsible for the fraud. And so that's the issue, is all of these things have changed and to increase the flow of money, because before the money was trapped, money transfer times were low. Now all of a sudden they're much quicker, right? I can transfer money to you right now within like a minute and a half, for real. Like, things like Zelle and Venmo and those things, they're amazing.
Mhm.
And interestingly, Europe had the person-to-person transfer thing down decades before the US ever got it. Their whole economy works differently, and always did, and probably always will.
Fewer bankers involved and credit card companies. I noticed that when I was in Rome, and the guys I went with who had been to Rome before told me, yeah, like make sure you always have cash when you're at a restaurant. Like they might do your credit card, but they might just not. And
Right.
so is that one of the differences between Europe and the United States, is the relationship to banks?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and banking's older there. But also there's weird stuff in Europe, like, and I knew this about Europe before I ever went, but let's say you go to Croatia, because I went to Croatia. Easy example. Take your credit card, because it's, 20, when did I go? 2020? Yeah, right in the middle of fake news virus scam. So you go there. I was like, okay, here's my credit card. Guy grabs a credit card machine because he doesn't have it with him. Runs your card, it doesn't work. He says, one moment, goes back, gets the second credit card machine. Runs your card, doesn't work. Gets the third credit card machine, it works. Have you ever? I mean, I've seen it happen a handful of times in my life in the US. That was every restaurant except 2. Same in England too, by the way. Same in in Scotland to be precise. Same in Scotland. They didn't have one credit card machine. They had like 3. Some of them have 4. And the different networks support different credit cards and, whatever. If you have a foreign credit card to get right. Yeah. Very different economic. Well, and also, they got grocery stores within walking distance of every house in the city. And in the city, even in Boston, you don't have that. I was very fortunate when I lived in Boston. It was a small mom and pop grocery store down the street. But it was an actual grocery store. It wasn't very big, but it was an actual grocery store. So yeah, we could walk to the grocery store. It wasn't a big deal. But that's unusual in cities in the US. You gotta work to get that close. When I was in Marlboro, I was grocery store's half a mile away, right down the street. Not a problem. I went twice. I went multiple months with no car, and I was fine. I was even able to get into Boston because you can take public transit. Everybody talks about public transport is terrible. No, it's not. It's there. I had no problems at all in Marlboro, Massachusetts, 25 miles out of the capital city, getting around without a car on public transport. It's not great, but it's there.
If your bus is a half hour late, it can really mess things up. So it's like the whole thing might be maybe a little more fragile than you hopping in your car and just going. Anyway.
Well, that's right. Well, and hopping in your car means also you can make appointments better. You can be more efficient about them. There's an efficiency to cars that doesn't exist without cars.
Right. Or doing everything within walking distance of where you live.
Right.
That's not practical for most of us. I want to talk about something that I value.
Please.
And that is my goofy phone. This little light phone here.
It's not even a
goofy
phone.
Little light phone here. And what I really value is also the people who are making it. So I had to buy a new case because I had worn the case off of my light phone here. And they actually sent me some sticker decals. I'm not sure if this is going to come through, but let's give it a shot anyway.
Not quite. Somewhat.
Your time equals their money.
Nice.
Because that's one of the things that they will never do on the light phone is they're never going to put any kind of a free app. Because if it's a free app, you're the product. And so it's got this strong kind of anti-advertisement thing. And so this doesn't feed the machine any data about me.
Right. Well, and that's the lie of freedom. Right? Like you don't get things for free. That didn't happen. Somebody somewhere put time, energy, and attention into it. And what are they getting out of it? Now, look, it could be a gift. It could be charity. That's wonderful. That's your department, Father Eric. Right. But was it, or is it something else? And that's what you have to kind of pay attention to. And the thing about money and storing value is that you can't talk about value from the perspective of a single person. In the same way that Plato talks about in the Republic, you can't talk about justice from the perspective of a single person. You can't even talk about value or justice or values as such from the perspective of multiple people. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. You're still stuck on a horizontal plane, right? You're stuck in now you're actually stuck in binary land, which, single land is fantasy land, right? The horizontal is binary land. And we don't live in either of those two places, thank goodness. We can lower ourselves to them, but we probably shouldn't, right? We can look up, see the landscape of values, right? Figure out where the values are relative to us, because maybe we're not imbuing the values that we should, right? And how do you know? You look up, because that's where they are.
Yeah. At least that's where they'd better be. Because you get in trouble when you're valuing something that's beneath you.
Exactly.
Yeah, when you're putting your love towards something that's unworthy of it. There's an interesting thing I noticed studying my man Thomas Aquinas. He talked about the virtue of temperance. The virtue of temperance, whereby you regulate your pursuit of bodily goods basically in an orderly manner. And he talks about, even before getting into the nitty gritty of the different things you have to regulate, talks about the integral parts of temperance. And it's twofold. The first integral part is, and this is where the people get confused. It's honesty. Honesty. What does that have to do with anything? You go back and look at the word that Thomas Aquinas used, honestia. That doesn't actually have anything to do with telling the truth. That has to do with honor.
Right.
It's etymologically related to the word honor. And so basically, if you're going to be a temperate person, you have to have an honorable aim towards your behavior, right?
Right.
And not an animalistic aim towards your behavior. So I have one of these to celebrate with Anselman, the valuable thing of the Friday night navigation.
Excellent.
That's fine, but if I go have 10, well, that's too much. And then the second principal part was shamefacedness. So you've got like a positive principle drawing you up, and you got a negative principle where if somebody saw me behave in this animalistic manner, I would be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
And so there's this sense that it's actually impossible to be a temperate human being alone.
Right. Right. Well, it's so funny. So there's a clip on my Discord channel. I forget which channel it was posted. It wasn't posted in the clips channel. I don't remember where it was posted now. But basically, the clip is off of this Paul Vanderklay guy's channel. You may have heard of him. And
Talked to him this morning.
oh, lovely. Oh, yeah, it's in What I Learned Today, actually. And my good friend Michelle posted it. And he's having a chat with somebody who basically, I don't know, I didn't watch the full conversation. It's just a clip. It's a minute, right, or so. And basically what he said was, well, the way I pulled up was I imagined my future children and what they would think seeing me do this. So every time I was doing something, I would imagine them there. And so when I was, taking a hit or whatever he was describing, some drug habit he had, just horrible. He said, I would imagine, what would they think of me or something like that doing this? It's like, yeah, you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You need at least your imaginary future children to help you out. And he kind of broke down at the end, which was interesting too. But I did want to address this from my good friend Josh. Is the value in the relationship? No, relationships are valuable. Am I worth what someone else is willing to pay? No. There is a kind of negotiation that happens. Well, yes, but the ability to have a relationship implies close enough values between you and the thing you're relating to. In other words, all the things you don't care about, you can't actually have a relationship with. Doesn't mean you don't affect them, right? And that's where people get confused. They're like, well, I have a relationship with this because when I do X, it moves Y. Fair enough. Like, sure, you have a relationship with every person on the planet because you pollute their air. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Useless, but and universal. So the fact that you do it and everybody else does it. Now what? Right? Because it's not like you're taking from them. You're all doing it. It doesn't make any sense. And people get caught up with that. So in the same way, relationship happens due to shared value. You don't have relationship without shared value. It doesn't exist.
Which comes first, though, the value or the person that you agree on with the value with? That didn't come out very clearly, but maybe you can
Well, the
interpret
problem,
that.
yeah, the problem is that, are you talking about relationship between people or relationship between you and, say, your lawn or your yard? Because I don't have a lawn. I've never had any grass. Well, not never, but I do not put grass near my house on purpose. If grass grows, that's different. Because I actually believe that the earth is important and Mother Nature is, Mother Nature needs my help, but largely does not want me to rip up whatever she's doing and put whatever grass I feel like in the area. That's not cool. So you can have a relationship with your yard, right? You can have a relationship with your house. You can have a relationship with your spouse. You can have a relationship with your boss, right? What is the value? Well, the value is the thing that gives you the relationship, not the other way around.
So the value has to come first, right?
Yeah. Well, the value is there with or without you. If you want something, quote, objective, which I object to the use of, that would be it, right? It's the Platonic realm of form stuff, the ethereal. So yeah, and then between people, to address Josh a little bit more specifically, well, everything between people is a negotiation, but that already happened, so it can't be last. I share a bunch of values with people that I do not identify with. Right? I can say that explicitly. I don't identify as Christian at all on purpose, deliberately. Whether you think I'm Christian-like or not is not relevant. And yet, a whole bunch of Christians really like what I have to say for various reasons. I mean, Father Eric, if nothing else, is testament to that. So, wow, there's something there. It's not Christianness per se, because I'm going to flat out deny it anyway. And I can back it up. Like, I still haven't read that silly book. What does that mean? Well, it means there's values and virtues out there somewhere, and that if Father Eric looks up and I look up, we're looking roughly in the same direction at the same thing, right? It's like, oh, that's interesting. And that's what gives us a relationship where he can come and spend a week at my house, right? That relationship is formed from that shared value, not the other way around.
So I'm thinking about my temperance example, right?
Yes.
And part of the important part of training your temperance, right? Of getting to the point where you can behave like a human being and not like an animal is basically receiving these values from others, right? Like being educated into them. Because if you just put candy in front of a child, they'll just eat the candy. Heck,
Ed,
plenty of
edu-
adults.
Educated, yes, but education doesn't only come from people. If it ever comes from people, and I might even disagree with that idea.
Oh,
Yeah,
so where does it come from if not people?
consequence.
And so the people are just providing consequences.
Well, yeah, explicitly in school. That's what school's all about. What do you think grading is? It's a way
Right.
to measure consequence. Right?
So I don't see how, if human beings are establishing, we'll say, a very high percentage of the useful consequences in education, you don't say that the human beings are at least partially responsible for education.
I think the way to look at it, and the problem that everybody has, is that people do not understand the extent to which the enhancement of the world around us, the thing we were born into, crazy religious people might say, use the word creation, is dependent upon us and our interactions. And so, obviously, because we didn't come before us, the world educates us in some way, right? Nature, at the very least, educates us in some way.
Absolutely. And a lot of it very valuable education. So I'm not going to say that it's like 90% humans and 10% nature, because my parents did me the favor of not letting me sit around and play video games for the entirety of my childhood and kicked me outside. That was good for me.
Yeah. Well, we enhance the consequences. And one of the ways we enhance the consequences, so you can imagine your imagination is one way you test type. Peterson talks about this. This is why this is the Peterson sphere. Peterson talks about this. We imagine things to make predictions. And then there's the real world. And so you've got two things, right? But when you have society or culture or any of that stuff, you now have a buffer between those two things. And you now have a way to bridge time for real, right? Because the old man can come up with a story that represents a pattern that a young man can't have experienced yet. And that young man can learn from that pattern. It's not strictly his imagination because it came from outside of him, right? Not that your imagination is informed from the outside. It is, but it's preformed. And now he can play with it in his imagination. And so again, we don't appreciate the extent to which we, as humans, refine creation, right? Through manifestation, consequence, and learning. And you can say the idea of education, as much as we would like to own it, is ridiculous. The idea of education is more wrapped up in our ability to adjust to consequence through participation, which means experience matters. And the reason why experience matters is because if you don't have experience, the quote knowledge you have of something is limited. It's flat. Either it's purely propositional or it's purely imaginal, right? And that's it. Those are pretty much your options.
So you would say that, well, say a good parent or teachers in a school, or even the high school bully that keeps things from getting too weak, they're only educating as instrumental causes of something else.
Well, no, I mean, I think again, it's just a refinement. So we mimic things as humans. We don't just mimic each other, though. So one of the things I did when I was a kid, we had a screen house that was just built out of these little aluminum rods that were tied together with a double hinge, so each one was hinged independently. And we tore it down, but I kept some of those things. And I took karate back when I was young, so I made up something called Kitty Ninja, and that was my style of karate. All the kids had their own style of karate. It was great.
Right. Everybody was kung fu fighting.
They really were. It's not just a song, folks. That idea, and you see this in Eastern thought, in particular in the martial arts. There's all kinds of martial arts names around the form of the tiger, and those are real things, and they mimic nature. So we mimic aspects of nature and bring that together in a higher form to some extent, right? And incorporate it into something like a martial art that has the form of the swan and the form of the tiger and the form of the eagle and the dragon claw and all of these mimickings. And they do mimic nature rather nicely, actually. Tai Chi does a lot of mimicking of trees, for example, swaying trees in the wind sort of thing. One layer up, we're doing that to find patterns in the world, and we're trying to educate one another to save each other time. And there are people who have never put their hand on a hot stove. Not too many of them, by the way, because kids are stupid, but and accidents happen. But those people exist, and the not having had that experience isn't a negative for them. Not that they aren't missing out on something, for sure, but it's not necessarily a detriment, which is good because we can't experience everything we even need to experience in the world. So having things like language and an education system, or at least a method of passing knowledge on from person to person, is very useful. Now, when you have a method of passing knowledge on, and that method is dependent upon context, or one might call that framing, and you then come in with a civilization destroying mind virus like postmodernism that says my framing and your framing are of equal value, you destroy the world.
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you even mean when you're saying that they're of equal value?
Right.
Right. Because it's like, golly, so you and I could both go to, we'll say Richard's church, right? His Western Rite Orthodox church. They're going to be celebrating the Divine Liturgy of Saint Gregory the Great up there. We'll be looking at the exact same thing, but I'm going to see more than you just because I have more knowledge and experience and participation with it. That'll be
Right.
your first ever Latin Mass, as far as I can tell. And so, but like that doesn't make you a bad guy. And you're going to look at, a page of C++ and understand it when it's just characters to me. So,
Right. Well, and the worst part is it's hard to tell which experience is more valuable. Yours
right.
as the knowledgeable insider with, first year canon law and all this priesty stuff that you do, or me as a first time, experiencer of the event. One of the great things that Peterson actually did was he re-enchants the idea of engaging in this way, saying, hey, you haven't experienced it. I mean, he doesn't do this directly, but effectively he says, hey, you haven't experienced this, but these other people have, and they found it valuable. That's weird. Right? So just because you haven't experienced it and therefore cannot know its value doesn't mean it's not valuable. And this is a tiff I'm having with Kale Zeldin on Twitter. He keeps using this word kayfabe. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done with this. It doesn't exist. You can say wrestling is kayfabe all day long, but the people who go to wrestling, who've been to wrestling, who've been involved in the wrestling community, they know all the same things you think you know about wrestling, but they know a bunch more about wrestling that you definitely do not understand even a little bit. And that came out in that Vanderklay conversation a couple months ago with the professional wrestler from Israel. It was a fantastic conversation, right? Because one of the things that it exemplifies is actually about value, which is the wrestler picks a persona and then kind of picks a side, good guy, bad guy, right? It's very black and white on purpose, deliberate. They know they're doing this, guys. They understand. As they play out that character, the audience may switch their side for them, not them. They're not doing that. There's a participation, to Josh's earlier point, a negotiation going on there. And it's like, oh, the audience is in on it. Of course they are. They're in on it. Oh,
Except for maybe the children, but
no,
they'll
no.
get in on it.
Oh, no. No, the children drive the bus, my friend.
I mean, the kids might think that these guys are actually intending to hurt each other.
Here's the problem. When you sort of think of it that way, you kind of miss the point of what's happening with the kids. When you're a child, the lines between fantasy and not fantasy are blurred.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And because of that, you tend to play more because you're trying to find this thing in my head. If I jump off of this branch of the tree that I just climbed, what's going to happen? Because in my dreams, I fly. But actually, that's not quite what happens. Right. And
It was a playground for me. It wasn't a tree, but
I
I literally
jumped out
said to infinity and beyond before I jumped too.
I jumped out of the tree to show the cat how to get down out of the tree. I'm very helpful, I guess, when I was 3 or something. We were living in Kansas back then, so yeah, I was probably 3. Maybe 4. So yeah, I mean, but I imagine the cat would figure out you can jump into the laundry basket that I jumped into. The cat did not figure this out. Cat probably already knew, to be fair to the cat, but it didn't have the results I thought. And yeah, and that's part of the problem with this postmodern ethos, is that we don't sort of appreciate the change in us from as we grow older. We don't appreciate the lack of change in Foucault and Derrida, who actually just never matured. I hate to break it to you. It's kind of obvious at this point.
No, break it to me. Break them before me.
Yeah.
Have those men who will not have Christ as their king taken before me and slay them in my presence.
I actually asked Dr. Stephen Hicks, who I rather like Dr. Stephen Hicks. He's a Canadian, although I guess he lives in the U.S. now. But he's a modern philosopher. I said, "Hey man, where's the good in postmodernism?" He said, "Yeah, you're right. There isn't any." I'm like, "Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know." I'm still there. But I did want to address, speaking of the good, I did want to address Josh. Maybe a different way to phrase my earlier question is the value in participation? Okay, Josh, completely backwards, you crazy materialist. No, the reason you participate is shared value. Now, and I went over this, right? When you participate and negotiate, more value is created or less value is created, right? And there is a reciprocation. So when Father Eric and I agree to do something, anything, right? We both do that based on a value. And in doing that, we increase the value that it has reciprocally. And so that value is greater than, we'll say, the time, energy, and attention that I put in, plus the time, energy, and attention that he puts in. That will not give you the formula for the value, or if you could, which you can't, measure my time, energy, and attention, right? Plus how much greater or lesser it is in relation to his, right? Plus my caring, and figure out how much value you can't do any of those things. Those are all ridiculous. Every piece of what I said can't be done, right? They're all ridiculous. But even if you could do all the ridiculous things, there's something mysterious about value that is going to escape your grasp, because it's not in the participation. It precedes the participation. I like this comment. Wrong. They are not, quote, really hitting each other, but they are, quote, really storytelling. Well, I wouldn't even say storytelling, right? Because again, we tend to black and white the world into knowledge and unknowledge. This is the problem of the age of gnosis. Substack coming soon. I've already actually started the opening. I got to say, the opening for the first article that I came up with is it's really good. I was like, oh, I don't think I even wrote that. How
much are you going to pay yourself for it?
I know, huh? I'm going to have to. In the age of gnosis, we get stuck in this idea that there's just these knowledge and unknowledge, right? But actually, there's exploration where we're trying to find value. We're actually looking for the where on the value. That's a mode that we inhabit. And there's a safety mode and an exploration. Actually, oddly, again, Peterson talks about this, the child, and he runs back to his mother, that whole thing, right? Explores. He doesn't frame it that way. And I think that would have been helpful had he done that. I'd love to talk to him about it someday. Have him give me a call. Jordan, call me. We'll chat. But that's part of it, is that people are getting it backwards. They're thinking that the thing that they see has something to do with how it started. The fact of the matter is, everything started before you existed. And so there's a limit to what you can understand. But certainly value comes before participation.
All right, I'm responding to Anselman here.
Mr. Incredible just uproots the tree and shakes the cat out. Yes, King. And this is as William says, this is multiverse. The internet strikes again. Are you trying to answer this thing? Anselman, as a boy, I thought wrestling was silly men looking ungainly in shorts and fake fighting. Yeah, well, that's what everybody thought.
Yeah, no. So when I was in seminary, we took a hall trip, everybody on the hall to a like maybe semi-pro wrestling tournament at a Knights of Columbus Hall in Bloomington, Minnesota. And it's not like I was dreading this. I'm pretty extroverted, so doing anything seems like a good idea to me. But I thought it's just going to be kind of dumb. I don't think I'm going to enjoy it. But boy, was I wrong! Within about 30 seconds, I was screaming for blood, and it was a great time. And this wasn't like the biggest stars, and all of the best stuff. This was like whatever schlubs they had in the Twin Cities area, plus some chick they flew in from Denver. And
Right.
the chick fight was just awful. Just
Yeah, I can't.
it's
can't.
just
Females
no
doing
good.
masculine things always just bothers me.
Yeah.
Any masculine thing.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. And like you could just feel like the energy gets sucked out of the room. It's like they open the airlock and bam, out it all went.
Yeah, nobody wants to see that style of competition between women. Like, yeah, we're just not tuned to it at all.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how
If they had been fencing, that would have been cool.
right. But it's amazing how people don't understand.
It's amazing how
shared value.
advertisers and the people running these things don't figure that out. I mean, maybe they do, and they just accept it as a business loss to keep the Rainbow Brigade from, killing their
No, they don't.
firstborn son or whatever.
No, the other problem with the age of gnosis is the assumption that everybody knows what you know, has available to them at least the perspective that you have, and understands things and interprets them all in the same way. And I got news for you. That's not how it works at all.
I retract my former statement and replace it with this. If I was running WWE, there would be no more chick fights.
Yes. Yeah, most people don't know that. There's Jesse. Welcome, my friend.
Hello.
It is very valuable to me that you have shown up. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Nice to see you, Father Eric.
Good to see you too. You're awful quiet right now.
Am I? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, he's Australian. They tend to be quiet. But yeah, your mic's a little lower than normal.
Okay. I will fix that.
I like the calm demeanor in his voice, though. That sounds much better than the.
Well, he just woke up, right?
Something like that. I got out of the shower, so yeah.
Okay.
It's also a long weekend here, so.
Oh, so you had the day off yesterday, or on
I'll
Monday?
have the day off in 2 days. Yeah.
Okay.
Day off in 2 days. So
well, even the knowledge of that makes you happy.
Yeah, it
yes.
does. It gives you like, less time at work, more time for me, or something. Some sort of value system like that.
I like Ethan. Ethan just Ethan's frustrating because he's always on the Discord from his truck rather, doing deliveries, and he cuts out. But Ethan, the world consists entirely of knowable and otherwise knowable. Yeah, that's the problem of gnosis. That's not the world, but yeah, that's the problem of the age of gnosis. That's really good.
Is that Albert Einstein in the background of your...
That is St. Pius of Pietrelcina,
okay.
more commonly known as Padre Pio.
Ah, yes.
And so the text says, pray, hope, and don't worry, which isn't anything Albert Einstein would ever say.
I don't know about that. He didn't think God played dice with the universe. William, with Google, we have gnosis now. Google is gnosis now. Yes. And here's the ironic part. I need to do a video on this someday. Everybody said like, oh, all we just need is, knowledge at our fingertips. And we have it. No one ever uses it. It's amazing how few people actually use it. It's one of my tricks. Because I can tell right away if somebody looked something up or not. I was like, all right, you never even looked this up. I'm going to take you to the woodshed. It's going to be glorious. For me, anyway. I don't care if it's glorious for them.
That's what my dad likes about having his Amazon Spybot in the houses. We'll just be arguing about something, and he'll be like, "Hey, Spybot, What is the day really 12 hours on the equinox everywhere on the planet? The answer is yes. He didn't believe me. That was correct.
Nice. That's handy. Josh, but the value is noted after participation. When you notice things is backwards from when they happen. Yes, observation comes last. That's where everyone gets confused, right? Because we think the world begins and ends with us in the age of gnosis, but actually, we did not come first. Hint: we didn't come first.
But
You
now
were born into something. I promise.
the end of our actions, though, that's different than the value. Then, like what we're aiming at and what the common value is.
The problem is people don't think in threes. It's literally the only problem. Everybody reduces everything to a binary. Just stop doing that. You're never going to understand anything at all about the world. The problem is when you don't engage in something at all, there's no value and there's no exploration. When you engage, you go, I'm an extrovert. My value is in hanging out with other people. These people want to go to wrestling. Okay. You've already noticed the value. The reason why you went was the value.
Well, it was also required. So they have mandatory fun in the seminary.
Yeah, but required, I submit, and therefore, right?
Yeah.
And that's nobody realizes you guys think you're not submitting. Oh boy, are you submitting? I think if you don't know what you're submitting to, that's why your life is out of control, right? But you're submitted. But again, we'll just go with the simple case. Well, I'm an extrovert and these guys want to go, so I'll just go along. And this happens to me all the time. Because like the odds that I want to actually do anything is pretty much zero. Like I got my own agenda. I don't whatever. So you're like, hey, you want to do X? And I'm like, do I pretend to be social and say yes and just go along with whatever they're doing? Or do I go back home where I'm safe and can work on my software? Right? Like, so when you decide to engage, now in the engagement, you find more value or different values than you were expecting, but the participation already was preceded by a shared value.
And one shared value can lead to another.
Well, once you're in the realm of values, now you can look around. Like it's not that hard. Like if you don't go into my living room, you can't look around my living room. I'm sorry. It's just a limitation of time and space or something, however you want to frame it. You can't know the potential of my property unless you come and visit my property. Like you just can't. I'm sorry. You can think about it. You can ponder it. You can imagine it. You can have a fantasy about it. Absolutely. And those fantasies may be more rich and correct than my physical engagement. That's theoretically possible and certainly does happen. But it's not the same as being here and walking the property. Right, Father Eric?
Yeah, no, I didn't really believe you when you said you had a pond until I saw it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a proper pond. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not a puddle pond. It's an acre or so of water. It's just under an acre of water, of navigable water. Yeah, it's a good sized pond. Nathaniel, gnosis is not knowledge. Well, they need to read Greek. At least not to Wolfgang Smith. Wolfgang Smith is an interesting character, and all the mystics. The mystics are all crazy people. You should ignore them. Gnosis is a contemplative state of personal certainty. No, because it's all wrapped up in, like, literally the Gnostics believe in a thing called forbidden knowledge, which would be things that other people don't have access to that they do, right? They're elitists by definition. I do agree that Gnosticism is a huge problem. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at how people are using Gnosticism. James Lindsay, despite what like Jacob may say, does an excellent job of outlining the actual history of Gnosticism and how Gnostics frame things and think about themselves. The problem, in my opinion, that he falls into, which most people fall into, is that they draw a causal thread because they're in the age of gnosis. They think that there's a causal thread, when in fact, it's very clear to me that if you are of above average intelligence, and you don't have better framing, like you try to build your own framing in certain areas, and I'm not going to classify that. I don't think anybody could, but you will fall into Gnosticism all by yourself. And then you will discover a Gnostic and you'll go, well, I must be right because he wrote about it 50 years or 100 years or 300 years before me. That's what's happening. And if you actually pay attention, that's actually what's happening. People are rediscovering the same easy frame over and over again. And they fall into a pattern that we label Gnosticism. And that's the better way to think about it. And James Lindsay gets that wrong, but he identifies the pattern correctly.
Probably. I mean, Gnosticism basically independently re-emerged with the Albigensian heresy in like the 12th century, 12th and 13th century. And it had a different flavor, right? Because part of this was now a Gnosticism in a thoroughly Christian context. And so part of what was drawing people to it was, the bishops and the priests were all corrupt. Big news, more at 10.
Yeah,
and money grubbing and not temperate and all of that. And the Albigensians, they were pure, they were white, they were dressed in white, and they would do nothing but fast and pray, and then tell you that procreation is evil. But I have it on very good authority that God is pro-baby, so heretics. Taken out by the edge of the sword, because we could do that in those days.
Nice. I did figure out Benjamin Franklin. It always pains me. Even if you are submitting, you are still valuing. You have to value to submit. You're not going to submit to something you don't value. Why? Take your conception, flip it. You'll get closer. I promise you guys. You all think, wow, I don't get this. Flipping thing. Mills, growing up, there was a kid who killed another kid doing wrestling moves. Look, man. Yeah, someday I will tell the story of the death of Hercules. I don't know how I'm ever going to do that.
There's always risk involved, though, in everything.
Well, that's the thing. Like
risk. Yeah.
If it's not wrestling, it's riding your bike. And if it's not riding your bike, it's playing chicken with the kids. If it's not,
have you ever pulled a muscle scratching your back?
Yeah, I know. Like people die doing all kinds of things. Well, well, you don't have to do much. I put on a sock once and threw my back out for a day. I literally crippled for a day.
I knew a priest who was taken out for a solid week because he sneezed while sleeping in an easy chair and had back spasms.
Yep. No, the body's very delicate. Anselm, Christian mysticism is knowing God intimately and personally. All right. If you take the Christian out, what is Christian? Christian is a specific, maybe not specific enough for some people, religious frame. So if you say mystics are all about, you're automatically wrong. This is what I mean by mystics. Using that word by itself makes no sense. Really has to be framed correctly. And that's it. Nathaniel. Maybe more what I'm getting at, but there is a Christian gnosis which is non-heretical to the church. Father Eric. He's looking for his lifeline there.
Yeah, no, what you just said is literally the correct. I mean, knowledge is one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Whereby you judge the things of this world in light of eternity. And if you want to call that like Christian gnosis, yeah, right. And so basically, a lot of these things are bad until you put them in their proper place. You submit them to the Most High God and to Holy Mother Church, and then all of a sudden they're fine.
According to
you,
crazy
Nathaniel,
Christian people.
You want to be very careful with what you define because you're going to get yourself into a category error. There is a specific reason to say divine insight than there is to say, Christian gnosis. Christian gnosis is a confusing. It's going to carry less water than the previous. And so the point about signaling or communicating to someone or messaging to someone is you want to give them the exact intent of where you're pointing to. So if you're saying Christian gnosis, what are you pointing to exactly? What's the pattern that you're pointing to? Are you trying to redeem gnosis from a category error? Because then that's going to get you into all sorts of pitfalls.
Yeah, that's why I usually prefer to just use traditional theological terminology and not reinvent things myself, because it's like, this is what these words mean. So,
Right. Well, and that is the sin of the age of gnosis. Is we're just reinventing over and over again. You know, the good conversation John Vervaeke had with Lantern Jack on Lantern Jack's YouTube channel there. And if you listen carefully, and maybe you can't, like it's not the easiest conversation in the world to follow. I mean, I thought it was quite nice. And Jack's very easy to follow in general, but you'll notice that every time, like Jack asked John several times, tell me the uniqueness of this Neoplatonism of which you speak. And every time John answered, Jack went, yeah, that's just Platonism. I mean, not like that, because I'm a rude son of a bitch, but he was very good about, yeah, but Plato said that. This is not after Plato. This is all Plato, all of it. And Plotinus in particular, and I forget where it was, but I read something that Plotinus wrote, and I was like, this is a denial of forms. He's not a Platonist at all. So, and don't be pulling the Plotinus garbage on me anymore. I'm wise to that trick.
well, he made Augustine not a Manichaean and into a Christian, so he can't be all bad. He demolished a good man's Gnosticism, so
That's the Titanic example. Maybe you're the mistake that serves as the example that so other people don't follow. It happens.
okay.
You ever see that? Those are the demotivator posters. If you've never seen them, they're awesome.
I've seen them. I've seen them.
Plus, we all know this Titanic was meant to sink anyway, right?
With hubris like that. Nathaniel, perhaps all things that work for crazy Christians. Right. Perhaps all things work for crazy Christians. Perhaps. I don't know.
It's in that book you refuse to read. It's actually right there in Romans chapter 8.
That's why people are thinking of Rome all the time. Unclean spirits are brought into proper orientation. Well, they can be. They aren't. It's not a given. You Christians and your this happens and that happens. I think your participation has a lot to do with what does and doesn't happen. I kind of said that earlier. Yeah.
Go back to that again. What was the
What, Nathaniel stuff?
unclean spirits are brought into proper orientation for us?
Yeah, not for you. You have the ability to bring them. You're given the tools to do that, but you still have to do something. It's not like God's not doing all the work. He's not your hand servant.
He's doing all of the hard bits, though. All the bits that would be impossible for us, he takes care of.
Right. All
With
the
prayer.
inaccessible bits.
With prayer, that's the thing. Like there are different energies, spirits, messages, energies. Pick your interaction with things outside of your own house. You need discernment there. You're assuming discernment, and that's the. I think that's where you're going to get trapped into gnosis. In gnosis, there is
Right.
that if you assume that you can discern at all times what you're encountering, then you're gonna get into, a pattern of self-deception, and that's what you want to try and avoid.
So that's the age of gnosis. Anselm, St. Clement of Alexandria spoke of Christianity as true gnosis. Well, and again, I mean, gnosis, yeah.
What they mean there is the true self. They
Right.
kinda get
Well,
into
and I
that
don't-
sort of personality.
Right. The problem is that people are misusing the word gnosis. Like, if you take gnosis out of context, it's a Greek word. The meanings of Greek words are heavily context dependent. Like, you could not have a Greek dictionary where it's got like 1 through 4 definitions. No freaking way. That wouldn't work at all. Because you have overlapping definitions in words based on context in Greek to a ridiculous extent. And that's a real problem for people because it makes it really tricky to interpret Greek texts. So, for example, in my particular copy of The Republic by Plato, it's not the cave, and it's not that he doesn't mention the cave, but in the parable that people refer to as the cave, it's actually translated as den. And again, it's not that he's mistranslating the same word that's used later. The word that's used later is translated as cave. That's very interesting. So why is everybody saying cave, cave, cave everywhere? Because the other 3 translations we looked at didn't differentiate between those 2 particular sections in book 7 that I'm thinking of. Yeah, Greek is hard.
Oh, I did a semester. It was awful. Those verbs. Don't talk to me about the verbs.
Nathaniel, I'm assuming only that the Bible is known as our sacred text. I assume
No.
that sounds like sola scriptura to me, but
When was that ever true? I'll just put that on the table.
there we go.
What were people doing before we could write things down? There we go. That's another.
Right.
Oh, they were saying mass.
Well, here's the problem. Like, if it's the Bible, are the people before the Bible not saved? Like, you screw yourself immediately. Like, you fall right in that hole. I had a chat with Karen Wong some time ago. I forget which one, because I've done a few on her channel. The Meaning Code, excellent channel. You want to see Wolfgang Smith? He's there. McGilchrist and DC Schindler are there too. Great talk. That was a great talk that she did. I was talking to her, and she's like, "Well, for us, the Platonists are all just Christians, just before Christ." I was like, "Oh, fair enough. That sounds good. Sounds good to me. Like, problem solved." Mills, is there a point where humility is no longer needed? No. Or can be relaxed? No. Because you got it right? No. And you just got to stay in the groove? No.
Nope. Got to stay hungry.
Right.
Just
the thing that people don't realize, it's probably too simple for our age of Gnostic brains. Movement is life. Non-movement is death. Like, it's no resting and relaxing. Like, there's a way in which your movement is easier and a way in which your movement is harder, up to and including that movement will take your ass out. And you want the movement to be easier. And sometimes that just means letting go of your past hatred or your past grudges or your memories of past interactions. And again, Peterson tells a wonderful story, right? One of his, I think it was his family member even, for years, he's having a feud with one of the other family members, and nobody in the family could figure out what the hell the feud was about until one day it kind of boiled over to a head. And this one guy just started going on, "You did blah, 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 and you this and you that and blah, 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 blah." And everybody's there. And they're all like, "Who on earth are you even talking about?" And then the person who was, upset and doing all this realized that what he was saying didn't resemble the person he was talking about even a little bit. And then everybody started getting along again. The feud was gone. It vanished in thin air.
Just to go back on this original point, there's a particular kind of unawareness that people have about stillness. Stillness, I would put forward, is a presence of mind. It's an awareness, a heightened awareness, the participation. You could even say it's it's something you pray for. It's not something you can assume instantly. It's not. Yeah, you can't just go, "Oh, I'm just going to be still now," And then the counter opposite to that, in some ways, to draw out the point here, is that too much stillness will cause you to be a zombie. You will become stuck in a pattern, in a rut. So you want to pay very particular attention to what your the mode in which you engage and are interacting in the world, because you need to filter out certain things. You need to slow down to filter out and see beauty, but also too much depth and not enough height will cause you to break your neck, or cause you to only want to eat flesh rather than to drink of the water of life. Or we could continue on many different examples there, symbolically. But yeah, if you value stillness as just a mode of anti-anxiety rather than a life-affirming presence of mind, you not embrace the fullness of life. So you have to, inside of that value that you may have of stillness may actually sit other values that you're unaware of that will cause you to limit your participation in the world. There's a bit of a spiel that I'm half mind mapping outside.
Nathaniel, contemplation and meditation are these balancing practices. Contemplation and meditation will send you into a mystic stupor and you'll look like a zombie. You need to be very careful. You need participation with others and participation in a living tradition. You can't rely on the tradition of the past, because tradition is a living thing. Because even if you write the words down accurately, and look, this is a Platonic and Aristotelian argument that Plato and Aristotle had between each other. Over time, language drifts because it's part of a living tradition. You can write things down accurately, and they cannot stay not optional, cannot stay that way. That's why you need a living tradition. You can count on two things. The tradition of the past was useful, it got you here, and it was flawed because perfection doesn't exist. The fact that it's changed is both good and bad. Some of the laws were fixed, new ones were introduced. Welcome to reality. That sucks, but also too bad. Anselman, action and passive reception both needed in approach to God. Well, in approach to anything, really. William, I deserve no respect. I copy Anselman.
Yeah, I think maybe this will help for a point of discussion. I think many people assume that they're in a comedy, that things are just going to work out well, rather than they're in a drama that's unfolding, or they will create drama around them. And this gets into my whole critique of there is no such thing as a rom-com. You can't have two things that are completely different views of life, or views of a story happening at the same time. One is about a challenge, and one is about the removal of all challenge and obstacles in favor of gratification. That would be the comedic element.
Well, yeah, a romance is a budding, a transformation, and a change. And a comedy is a contrast between two things that exist in the same time and space, but get swapped in framing usually.
Yeah, comedy is also the kind of the axiom of a comedy is things coming back into alignment, or things returning home in some sense. A romance is typically personified as a continuation of things that are dramatic. You can, Odysseus returns home, then he still has to leave again to go on to there's the call of adventure is still living within him, rather than A Midsummer's Night's Dream is everything was kind of very mystical, and it's would be the end of the tale. It leaves no stone unturned, would
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the problems when you flatten the world is that when the world is flat, you're way more important. Right? Because it's not that much above you. You know, the hierarchy's flattened out. So, you know, you tend to cast yourself as a heretic when you're not teaching. If you're not promulgating your ideas to others and trying really hard to get them to convince them of something, you cannot be a heretic. Like, heretical beliefs are not beliefs that are different from someone else's. No, those are called disagreements. We have a word for that. Yeah. Or misunderstandings is another aspect of that. Things like excommunication are very specific terms. Things like heretic, very specific term. Right? You're not one. Don't worry. You're not that special. You're just a person like all the other persons. And there's so many
A Muppet,
people like
Mark.
you. Well, I was getting there, you know, and ultimately, you're a Muppet. I'm a Muppet. We're all Muppets. I mean, that's the thing. Like, we're always trying to elevate our status for whatever reason. In the age of gnosis, status elevation is a big deal.
It's always been a big deal.
Well, but it's a big deal now because status, you cannot determine status, right? When you've got people in government dressed in sloppy clothes, when you've got some pretentious garbage human wearing sweater vests who has $80 billion, you know, you don't see the hierarchy anymore. And so your only method of status is a sign that you show off on the internet or a dance you do on TikTok, or right, it reduces to affectation, right? How beautiful is that woman, right? But now you have a bunch of attention things, you know, nipping at you.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to put this out right. Getting back to this idea of the true self, the true self, maybe in a previous time was considered, you know, a turn inward to the divine spark or to the image of God within. But now the true self is kind of this externalization of the person's personality and the fulfillment of their true potential, so much so that it's at the expense or cost of everyone else. So rather than bearing the image of a divine being, it's being the divine being in contrast to all other things that are in life. So the self no longer becomes an individualization project rather than a project of harmony or peace. Wonder what you think about that, Father Ag.
I mean, the problem, like, first off, there's no mysterious you inside of you that you need to find, because you're not like a determined thing yet. Like, you're still alive and you can still change. You can repent, or you can become wicked, or you can just kind of muddle along kind of the same through your entire life. So there's and you know, like, what your ideal of a true self could manifest itself differently in various stages of your life.
My ideal. I was talking about the concept and how it's changed over time.
Yeah. So I don't know. I didn't quite follow what you said, and I ranted.
Okay. When the project of self-actualization that began around the 1970s, before that, self-actualization or developing of one's character became about a community, or it became about worship or religion or a tradition. That self-actualization project got changed from an internalization project, like being modest, you know, not praying out loud, versus now it became an externalization of that. That's what. Maybe I've said a bit of that.
And it's obviously going to lead to a confused place, because the traditional way of going about what you're calling self-actualization, also say pursuing virtue and glory of God,
right,
that comes from shared values. That
Right.
comes from having Christ at top and saints who imitated him. Um, and you see that once you remove that framework for people, well, people are still going to strive after things because otherwise you're frozen, and it ends up just becoming extremely confused, and people want really dumb things.
Right.
I want to beat all of the Soulsborne games without getting hit once. And people have done that. And it takes a long time and a lot of skill, a lot of tea put out into the void of Twitch.
Yep. Yeah. Well, for anybody to know about it, because you do it by yourself, the value's limited. I did want to address this because actually, Mills, I think this is right up our alley, right? Is the world flat in relation to the transcendent? No. As in, it has additional dimensionality that the world lacks. No. The dimensionality is there. We don't lack anything except eyes to see. That's whoops, that's more the issue. Whoops. There we go. So the issue is more around we're flattening the world. And because we're flattening the world, we're limiting our own participation. And that's on us.
Is flattening the world the right term for it, or is it cutting ourselves off from the transcendent?
Well, it's the same thing, right? Reducing, compressing the world, receding from the highest, right? And I'm going to loop it in because the idea of self-actualization makes no sense and is absurd, right? So when we say self-actualization, you should immediately, flags should go up, red lights, sirens, whatever, right? Wait a minute, that's impossible and silly, right? Obviously, if you could self-actualize, you would, and then you wouldn't need to. Like it degrades immediately because it's self-referencing, right? It's a trick because and this is what Jesse was pointing to. Define self because you're always moving, so that already didn't happen, right? And define actualization. What is that? What the hell does that mean? Now there's a bunch of standards and judgments that no one's ever talked about ever in the history of self-actualization. Right? Because you can't, because it doesn't make any sense. Like my self-actualization, such as would exist, may have no overlap with Jesse's. Right? When the thing that they're talking about, that would be true. And so what the hell are you talking about at that point? If it's not independently verifiable, if it's purely conditional only upon you, I don't know what we're talking about if it's conditional only on you. That's a fantasy. That's imagination, pure imagination. And when you take something like the idea of getting closer, higher up the chain towards something eternal or ethereal, or maybe both, that changes what's happening. Because now you have a goal to actualize. What are you actualizing? Oh, you're actualizing becoming a better son of God or something, right? A better ethereal being in the Platonic realm, whatever. They both work. When you're not doing that, you're defining it lower. You're flattening the world. You've done away with the hierarchy. There's no saints to look up to show you the way to something higher, right? That the hierarchy's gone. There's no ladder to climb. The ladder's gone. That's the flatten the world. There's no more ladder to climb. People talk about climbing the ladder. In a flat world, there's no ladder, guy. There's no up.
So I mean, like I agree with all of that basically. The language you're using, it sounds like you're actually doing something to the world when you talk like that. So very often when I'm preaching, I'll go into some of these topics, but I won't use that. I'll say, people who don't believe in God or spirits, they can't see the upper half of the world. They believe only in the things that are around here. And when you do your hands like this, people understand what you mean. And when you go like this, people understand what you mean. And I think that's better language because you're not actually getting rid of hierarchy. Like, what are you? Are you insane? No. Do you think you can actually get rid of that? Do you think that's actually underneath your control? Absolutely not. What you're doing is just blinding yourself to it and limiting yourself to everything being sideways. So I don't know. I'm not
So you're
sure.
flattening the world. Your world is now flat in relation to mine.
Yeah,
And
I
I like,
guess.
I forget which Vanderclay, man, sometimes that guy just knocks it out of the park. He has a couple talks on eyes up versus eyes down, and they're fantastic. When he does those talks, they are great. Like, they need to be much shorter, of course. But when he's exploring that topic, wow, what a bang up job he does on eyes up, eyes down. And it's the same thing. But when your eyes are not up and they're, you know, they're looking down, right? The world is flat. That happened. Yeah, the hierarchy doesn't go away. That's Peterson. Hierarchy is older than trees. Lobsters have hierarchy, right? And then people criticize him for that. Their critiques about that are invalid and they sound like morons and they think they're smart because they know some other thing about this. It's like, that may also be true, but two things can be true at the same time, as Ben Shapiro used to be fond of saying. I don't know if he still says that. And that's the flattening of the world. Oh, no, it's not the lobsters. And no, that's not how that works, because it also works this way. Okay, but you're using an exclusive or, and you're saying it's this or this, and that's not true. It's both. And so the fact that it's both doesn't take away from either one. I don't know what else to tell you. You flatten the world down to a binary where you're like, Peterson says this, but also this. I'm preferring this one, and therefore Peterson's wrong. No. The fact that you're preferring this other explanation that also works does not mean Peterson's wrong. It just means that there's more than one explanation, and maybe they're equally valid or they're equal contributors. I don't know. I don't care. But they're not exclusive of one another. And that's where people get confused, is that non-exclusionary aspect, because they're squishing the world into a binary so they can understand it as yes or no. Identify with or identify against. That's what they're doing. That isn't the world you're living in, though. But you can ruin the world by acting as though it is. That's my objection.
So, I mean, that makes sense to me. I'm wondering if you're trying to talk to materialists, if this flattening the world business is going to be the most effective thing. Just because, like, the second you start talking about the world, they're thinking about burning balls of gas and fundamental physical forces.
I usually start with a preference hierarchy. So we all have our preferences, right? But there are actually overlaps between our preferences, right?
Right.
It completely, once you start that, there is agreed upon good chocolate, right? Out of nowhere, right, we have a value that's completely non-deterministic. It's based upon experience. And it's also based upon observation. So that tends to break them because there's no dog in that fight, right? It's completely outside of a dogmatic perspective, right? You can't argue with something you find pleasurable that we can all agree upon. So it removes that aspect out as well. But now you're getting into, okay, well, there's a spirit of chocolate that we all agree upon. And then, okay, now I start to see it. One thing that, as you were both discussing there, and maybe this will be helpful, if you keep turning a blind eye to the horrors of the world, you actually look at the true horror, or you'll become blinded by a true sort of horror, right? Which is, not being able to see the face of God, or not be able to experience the fullness of reality, or not be able to distinguish. Everything becomes grey and dull and flat because you lose contrast. Like, you lose the ability to see negative signals, and you'll lose the ability to connect with others too. If you can't see that, what would be a neutral? There is no neutral dark thing in some sense. Like, it's you can't look at study all the dark aspects of the world, but failure to at least acknowledge that they exist will cause you to be inside of a malaise that is the most dark thing ever, which is the complete removal of the fullness of life. or the kingdom of God. We could
Right, because
alternate
you'll go
reality.
into the uncanny valley. It's like,
Yeah,
this
you
looks
could
like a human being, but there's something missing there.
Yeah, and usually just it's a self-reflection at that point. Once you
Right. Well, and the problem is that until you understand the flattening, until you understand the compression or the reduction, you don't understand what your problem is at all, and you can't. It's not possible. And that's why Vanderklay has great success with Crisis of Faith people using eyes up, eyes down. I don't use eyes up, eyes down except as an after reference, right? Because Peterson's tactic is very different. He doesn't do eyes up, eyes down. He does hierarchy, and therefore, it's a very, very different approach, right? Because hierarchy is the scientific word for all of this enchantment. What is enchantment? It's vertical causality. What's vertical causality? Vertical causality is hierarchy. It's not that mysterious at the end of the
That's
day.
right, baby. Let's go back to the rule of the priests.
Well,
we are a real place. It's just a different priest.
Right.
Contention.
Well, and that's what I was going to say.
Single
Jesse,
issue,
right?
single issue people, essentially.
Well, but that's Benjamin Franklin made a comment earlier back, right? Like, because hierarchy is inevitable, when you take it out of one place, it reappears somewhere else. Right? And so you can take hierarchy away if you want, but it's just going to pop back up. And if it's not in the religious sphere, it'll pop back up in the corporate sphere. Yeah, or the economic sphere, or the political sphere, or right? Because it's already there in all those things. And the more you deny it, the more you're trapped by it. And that's part of the problem with not accepting limitation, constraint, and consequence, right? Like, you were born into a time and a place. Yup, that happened to you. You need to get over that real quick, because nothing you think now is going to have changed that ever, right? And so you're looking back when you have that attitude. You need to look forward, because all the values in the future.
Or trying to make everything safe, or pleasing,
right,
or appealing. The two, appeasing and appealing. There's a lot of that going on since the 90s. Essentially, is we constantly enlarge the pool of what we do and don't consider. Valuable, actually, ultimately. So we need to extend what we find valuable, so much so that it becomes a mismatch of different relationships between value. You can't have freedom of expression and then removal of risk at the same time, because those two things will actually self-oscillate or cancel themselves out.
Welcome, Chad and Shane. How you doing?
Hey there. Hey, Shane. It's been a while.
Hey. Yeah, it has been a while.
You guys talking about hierarchy, constraints, and whatnot?
And lobsters.
Value
rule.
mostly, but value is all wrapped
Zombies.
up in hierarchy. So
Nice.
Is my audio good on your end? Your audio is really sketchy for me.
Like mine?
Well, just everything coming through my earpiece is jittery.
you're
I
clear.
mean, it depends on how much you paid for that microphone, but for the size of it, I think it sounds fine.
You sound fine.
Cool. What's been happening in my last kind of hour may sound like a little bit of a downer, but it's the reason I tuned in. Seemed really relevant. Is I was having a conversation with my brother who has he had some lymph cancer 15 years ago ish, and he's kind of been an alcoholic and just been living his life in a a non-productive way. No kids, no relationships, no nothing, and just kind of staying drunk for the last 15 years. And he got arrested and put in jail for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And what that did is it got him some medical attention that let him know he may only have like like he was having strokes, like while he was in jail, and they thought that it was because he was having withdrawal from his normal like routine of alcohol and drug consumption, and it may have had something to do with that. But my conversation that I just had with him on the phone, just before tuning into you guys, was him just conveying this just bitterness that he has, the reality that he thought he lived in up until a couple of weeks ago is being altered. He's like, and he's, he was drunk while he was talking to me, and he's committed to this lifestyle that he's had, since he was a teenager. He's no quitter. But it means that he's very likely going to die, and he was just angry that this story about his health and his life was being imposed on him, and that this reality that he had created for himself, that he was going to live forever and just tell a favorable story about his life and his experience. He's not happy about the intrusion, and it just seemed very relevant to what you guys were saying.
Yeah. Well, it's his time for redemption is running out, and when you're going to live forever, there's plenty of time to redeem yourself. I'm like, yeah, it's cool, man. I got plenty of time because I got whatever. I'm going to die when it's at least 10 years away. That's all good.
Yeah, if you're lucky. If you're lucky, you go quicker than longer, because the thing is, especially alcoholic death is typically quite a lengthy process.
When he was having these little mini strokes, and so they took him to the emergency room, and they couldn't get a blood pressure on him, so this is after they released him on bail. But while he was in jail, they just thought their equipment was faulty. So after he got out, and he was like up on a ladder painting a house, and like he's showing some odd behavior up on the ladder, and the guy's like, dude, what's going on up there? And anyway, ends up taking him to the emergency room. They couldn't get a pulse on him, and they were busy loading him up with drugs, thinking he had really low blood pressure. And then they tested his blood pressure on his leg, and they're like, holy crap, stop the drugs. We're killing this guy. He's got fine blood pressure on his lower body. And so what he now knows is that his circulatory system, because of the radiation that he had 15 years ago, his body has figured out ways to get the blood where it needs to go that are completely unconventional. Like, he is a freak of nature. And so all it would take is a very subtle disruption in his blood pressure or something like that to knock him dead, to the extent that the kinds of surgeries that they would do on a normal person, they're not willing to risk, because they'll kill him just touching him. And so that's kind of what has him disturbed, is he's like, oh my God, like I could drop dead at any minute. And that's the reality of it. And he hates that story. Like, he hates that story. And I don't blame him for hating it. I hate that story. This is my brother. I love him. I don't want him to be gone. But in a certain way, talking to my mom about how she's handling all this, she's like, I've known I was going to outlive him for a long time. I was going to find him in a ditch somewhere, because of his alcoholism. But this really does put a different flavor on it, because it won't be as acutely related to his behavior. It's more abstract. It's more like, no, it's 15 years worth of behavior that brought you here, bro. Not one stupid, comment that you made to the guy at the bar.
Right. Yeah. When you're in that situation, it puts your values in question, and how have you enacted your values, and what value you thought you could bring to the world, and what value you thought the world was going to bring to you. And
I'm not sure if this would be appropriate to say, but there may not be time to save the body, but he can save the relationship.
Right.
Unfortunately, yeah, even under normal circumstances, our bodies are temperamental.
I was so
It's the
grateful.
relationships that survive and the legacy of that's what matters.
I was so grateful to have this vocabulary that I've learned in this corner of the internet as he was talking to me about being upset about not being able to just have his own reality, that really where people get comfort is from confirmation that their senses, that their predictions come true in reality. That's what tells you
Right.
what reality is. And
Right.
so since my wife is has a lot of experience in the medical field, I was like, why don't you talk to her and she'll tell you what to look for and listen for to confirm whether or not your body is actually experiencing these things that these doctors are telling you, because then it's not somebody's story. It's your senses confirming that that this is real, and then you can choose what to do with it. And it was really nice to have that vocabulary at hand.
Yeah, well, and just sort of understanding that you can back things up with your experience. And so you don't have to rely on pure propositional narrative, right? Some of the narrative that you have is through your experience. And that's actually good to know, because then you can give people more tools. I think that's the great triumph of, we don't like to call it this little corner, we'll call it the Peterson sphere, is that Peterson, does give you those tools.
Shane, I'm curious. You actually sound pretty optimistic right now when you're talking. Is this like, all things considered, a good sign that this stuff is happening?
No, I'd probably say it's just sort of shock and sadness, and I don't know. Like I don't have any control over it. Yeah, I don't know. I could just as easily cry.
Okay, so you got a lot of mixed feelings going on with all this then.
If I had a sense that my brother was like gonna be around for a while, like then I would have hope that a change would bear more than just like an existential release into God's kingdom, which I still hope for, and I'm going to try my best to introduce him to Jesus. Like, I know Jesus, and I want him to know that he can run into that man's arms and he'll take him. But I think that's the best I can hope for at this point. Like, there's just not a lot more time than that.
Yeah.
Like, I have a family that has taken a long time to build, and he's not going to have that.
Right. Right.
Has he tried like 12-step stuff or anything like that?
Can you say that again, Chad?
Has he tried
what?
12-step stuff at all?
12-step program.
Am I breaking up here?
No,
I can hear you just fine. He's talking about Alcoholics Anonymous and those sorts of things.
My brother doesn't see his lifestyle as a problem in any way. So.
Right. No, I get it. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, man.
Maybe what be good to go for it, Chad. What maybe if you haven't heard anything, I was going to point to the direction that may be a little bit more generative as a topic. Is your bravery right now, Shane, is going to be the best example to others. How you go through this crisis or this opportunity, depending on your symbolic. The Chinese actually have a interesting opposition in their word for crisis, which is that a crisis is both a challenge and an opportunity. So what you're going to go through in the next couple of weeks, that's going to determine how brave in your character, and if anything's going to help your brother find some healing or redemption, it's actually you. It's your character and your bravery in the situation. So that's what I'd recommend. Peterson often talks about the marking of a good man is someone who can be confident and brave in the time of someone's funeral. So that's what I was just going to pass on.
It was interesting how much comfort I was able to bring him, even in the conversation we had an hour ago, by letting him know that I wasn't trying to take his agency away. If he wanted to go out in a blaze of drunken glory tonight, amen. Like, it's your life. And you know, I'm like, he said, he, you know, he's like, I love you, bro. Like when he he you know, had to get back to his drinking, you know. So I know there is this opportunity here. That I certainly have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, well, sometimes people need to be reminded how valuable they actually are, and that's actually what's happened to them, is they've lost that that part of themselves, that, or they've installed a limiting belief that they're actually valuable and they have something to offer to bring to others, even if it might be small. If they've hidden that, you know, light, you could say, or that ability to go through circumstances in life without needing to be gratified through those circumstances. Like that's a kind of intrinsic value that some people lose, is that, you know, you can just go through things and pain is just going to be there, and sometimes it's not all comedy and happiness. You know, you'll have to walk through moments, and so not having that value of what would you call that, Mark?
We're not having that sense of value, I think. But,
Yeah.
But also there's another aspect to value, right? There's the value that you have the other to others, and there's the value you can bring forth into the world. And by telling somebody they have a choice, that means that to some extent they have some control over the value they're manifesting and the value they have access to. And those two things combined are very, very powerful. It's akin to Peterson's "What You Do Matters."
Yeah, that gets kind of tricky when it comes to talking about alcoholics. Like, it's tricky. Because a lot of alcoholics I know of have an overinflated sense of value.
Mm-hmm.
And
Narcissism, yeah.
And it's just like, yeah. I commend Shane for just being there for his brother. Like you said, hey man, if you want to go out in a blaze of glory, go right ahead. I love you. Sometimes that's just the best thing. And sometimes before they get to the kind of the stages that his brother is at, maybe it's like, well, I'm not going to watch you do it. You can do what you like, but I love you and good luck. And then probably go find an Al-Anon meeting or something.
Yeah.
I'm actually watching this television show right now called The Bear on Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm quite pleased with it. And first time I've ever seen Al-Anon in a television show. And they're doing like a fantastic job. Because usually when they do AA on television, they just screw it up. Right. But they nail this Al-Anon stuff. It's kind of.
I think I saw season 1 of that in a binge watch.
Yeah, that's what we're on right now. I'm really pleased with it so far.
What did you find pleasing about it?
Well, I like that. Like, I'm not. First of all, I'm not familiar with any of the actors. Vaguely familiar with maybe the cousin, or the good friend Rich or whatever. But he, as much as he kind of pisses me off, he's pulling off the character really well. And you're getting at definitely some meaning crisis stuff going on. And yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised, because television shows typically aren't that compelling to me. So I don't know. I guess I have difficulty putting my finger on exactly what it is. But you could see that, like, the main character's constantly kind of, while he's struggling with stuff, like he's looking at a picture of, I think, like one of the angels or a saint, and so he's constantly kind of looking at something. So he's
Mm-hmm.
having like some sort of conscious contact there with something greater, and he just he decides to try to submit to something because he's kind of reached an end for with his suffering. Like he refuses to kind of suffer in the way that he has. My dog is going ape shit right now. Hang on.
Oh, well, Shane, sorry for my connection is bad. I'm listening and appreciating your advice and encouragement. Yeah, well, that's rough, man. That's rough. Yeah, and it's weird, right? Jesse, we've seen this shift in television. I'd say The Wire was the shift to the grittiness, where people were like, oh yeah, there's this grittiness to, I mean, yeah, you could go back further, but I mean, I think The Wire was the one that really said everything. And I only saw The Wire recently, a couple years ago. And I was like, oh, I can see why people like this. I get it, but also, wow, what is this saying about society, about the world, that this is surprising. I'm like, really? You didn't really understand how hierarchy worked? And right, because one of the things The Wire does is it exemplifies how the same corruption manifests at different layers. Because it's not like the quote hero character is perfect or a great guy, right? Like he's perfectly willing to cut a bunch of corners at his layer just to get his agenda done. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes it's bad for him and everybody else. And he just can't tell the difference because you can't. But you see that all the way up. You see that at every layer in the hierarchy with that particular show, and some of the others as well. But that breakdown from the wholesome message into showing the gritty stuff. Fleabag's another. I couldn't watch Fleabag. Oh my! How anybody ever watched even half of that first episode is like whatever. Like I don't know how you do that, but that grittiness, everyone's attracted to it lately.
What I would say here is that there was a cultural shift from movies that are encoded for masculine audiences were about real people, real times and places. So I would say maybe Predator, Rambo, Top Gun. These are very much about the time and place of the people, and they're personifications of the people and the values of their time. There was a shift somewhere after the 90s where things became less about the present moment and more about defining things in a microcosm. And the problem with focusing on a microcosm is it's not an example of anything. It's not either showing how bad things are in a dramatic sense or how to deal with things in the present moment. It's kind of a view from nowhere. It does not it does not personify any character traits that could be helpful to reveal. Stories are meant to have some sort of moral message in any sort of version of storytelling. Stories are at least meant to have an embedded set of principles. Yeah, so
There's the
flattening it
flattening.
down. Yeah, so that's what I would say, and probably one of the reasons why Chad is enjoying the Bear show is that she's actually opening up, because that show is literally about the time, present, place of our now. And it's actually got principles. The AA program is full of very, very, very diligent principles. Let's just say it that way. So yeah, of course, it's going to be attractive to a large audience because it's doing what stories should do, which is be a reflection for an audience to, consider where they are in the world. Yeah, I could go further in what Rambo actually did, which is just made a whole generation more depressed than it already was. But
I recently watched the Asteroid City movie, and
oh gosh, I wanted to tear the screen down after I watched that. But anyway,
I don't know why you would want that, but I thought it was actually pretty damn good. I thought it was
what moral message was in that Asteroid City movie?
Well, I don't
What
know
was
if they're
positive? What did it generate? What conversation did it start?
Well, so you want me to list things for you?
No, you could just throw something. You don't have to throw a list. It's just
No,
what
it
was
shouldn't be
there.
a list. It should be
Yeah.
a conversation, actually.
Well, I thought it did a good job of doing this thing where, because I don't know, it's not really a linear narrative exactly. So it's kind of touching on a lot of different kind of topics. I guess for lack of a better word, it has that kind of whatever that meta modern thing is, where
Mhm.
you're talking about basically just hitting the ends of modernity basically and seeing how it's kind of like complete shit show. And like these people who are made to worship something, and these people don't have anything to worship, and you're seeing I thought it was interesting how the teacher who was in that, did you see the how she's like got this kind of top down thing on the kids, and so just like abruptly she'll have the kids call out their number so she can see where they're at, just like out of nowhere. It's just like almost at any random point. So it's kind of like this, I don't know, for lack of a better word, maybe this oppressive kind of top down thing. And then right after that she'll have them like pray, but it's so mechanical. So it's not that prayer is bad or that her discipline or her authority is bad. It's like it's just so mechanical. So that was one of the things I was noticing. Um, let's see. God, there's a lot.
Yeah,
but
there is a lot there.
what's good about that? I mean, this is the problem, right? There's no edge of modernity. Modernity never goes away. Modern is always now. And so it doesn't make any sense of talking past the modern or before
That's
the
exactly
modern.
the point. It's talking about like I think it's talking about something that I think only very few people are actually getting at and talking about explicitly. And I think that,
I'm sure of that. Right.
right. And I think
Right.
we are the ones who are kind of talking about these topics, and this using like an artistic um, tool to get at some of these topics, and maybe have you reflect on like what is it? Where are you standing? You know, yes, like you're at the edge of modernity, and it never ends.
Okay, so just to be clear, you
Mhm.
think that the teacher was that in the representation of the teacher in that film was a negative or a positive?
Um, I don't think it was necessarily either or. Like there's
So that's a problem right there. Thank you, Father Eric. Nice to see you. What I would say is that the aspect of the teacher in that film is the only positive message in that, because the teacher is exemplifying you could say a model of feminine behavior that the world lacks. And the film actually deals with the death of a mother. And the film actually deals with femininity in a bunch of different ways. And that's the only example of a feminine that's actually at least able to positively exert herself on the world. Every other female in that film is actually defeated in different ways, including the mother who's dead. It was obviously the
including the teacher herself.
Yes, but that's a different topic for a different time. The point is that if you're
Not a
looking
different
for a
topic
moral
for a different
message,
time.
it's that
Because
the
like
teacher's
if you're
actually
asking,
unable to enact her power on the world, or at least her influence on the students. And it's having a positive effect.
but the whole time you can see that she doesn't even believe it. Like that's what I'm trying to get at. And so like the one time that she finally starts to notice like this other guy, obviously like she's a single woman who probably should have her own kids maybe, and so she's like off on this field trip, and she's just like, I don't know, it's
Is
got
is that not a good message though? the revelation that she can, you can't always be the teacher. You actually have to have skin in the game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not like there, it's not this your binary of was it good or was it bad. I thought it actually had more depth than just some binary. This is good. This is bad thing.
I
That
was asking for
you're
what
insisting on.
positive messages there are in the film and what negative messages are in that film. I never used good and bad as a binary or a dialectic. What I was saying is,
but you
a
did,
negative signal. A negative signal can actually point towards a positive.
But you did though.
I don't know.
He said, is
Replay the tape.
he was trying to get it. Would your characterization of the representation of the teacher be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Like what?
Oh, I thought that the representation it had depth, and I thought like a lot of the different representations. I mean, it's obviously it's satirical as well. Like the father figure in there. I mean, he's like all of the father, the son, and then the grandfather. They're all just kind of like I don't know. It's to me, it's like the jig is up. Something went wrong. We missed something somewhere along the way, is what it seems to be talking about.
Well, and if it's not pointing towards values, positive or negative, then yeah, that's what you're missing. You're actually missing value.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a problem for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And exemplifying that is probably not good. What you should be exemplifying is value, irrespective of belief. Like you don't have to believe in the dollar to be able to buy a candy bar with one. In fact, most people now don't believe in money. They don't see the fiat currency as anything but a fiat. And it's like, okay, but you're using it all the time. So the fact that you don't believe doesn't mean there isn't a positive aspect because you're engaging in a positive way. So the belief is kind of irrelevant at some point. If you're acting as if, you're acting as if.
Well, I don't know. I just thought it was a great movie. I thought it was engaging, and I don't know. I guess I'm having difficulty. Maybe it's because I'm stupid, and you're the intelligent one, Jesse, and you can.
I don't know if
maybe
you
actually
should
you're
go
the
there.
actual arbiter of what is actual good and bad. So
maybe
maybe
I don't know why you'd make a character attack on me and Ed Holman, a very sly character attack. What I'm trying to get towards is, Wes Anderson. Mark actually talked about this offline last week. Wes Anderson actually has a habit of desacralization of the traditional aspects of Western civilization. So in this asteroid film, what happens is science is the ultimate value, and science is actually pushed up along the way.
It wasn't the ultimate value in that film. That's what you missed.
What was the ultimate value, Chad?
It was that it doesn't work. It's like the fact that
it doesn't work.
The fact that what you're saying is you said that science was the ultimate value in the film, and what I'm saying is it was actually saying that science isn't the ultimate value.
Okay, so then the film ends with everyone stuck in the desert.
No, the film ends with them saying this question: if you don't fall asleep, you can't wake up. There's nothing to do with science. And so the whole idea is science had gotten, like, this idea of science as the ultimate value got them to the trouble that they're in, which is the desert, and they're actually leaving the desert at the end of the film.
Yeah, there's an aspect of the film that you've gotten right there. I just don't believe that the film actually makes that case. I think it's just we're still in the frontier of the West, and we're just moving on to the next town. I don't think they actually ever leave the desert because you never see the characters, or there's never ever talk. There's never any other context other than the stage, which is the subliminal element of the film, which is and there's actually two stages going on, so there's actually three abstractions there, Mark. So there's the stage, and there's a play within the play, and there's actually a play within the play as well, which is quite frustrating to narrow down, because every time you get to a second layer abstraction, you actually get further away from what can be said about the main topic. So, yes, and there's also there is a dreamlike aspect of the film with its pastel colors and everything. My contention is even in the stage elements of the film, you still feel like it's a barren landscape because it is all behind the scenes of the stage, in front of the scenes of the stage, in a carriage that's set up like a stage. So you never leave this aspect of a theater. You never see people in the promised land, you could say. They haven't left. They haven't left this sense of what's the spectacle of life. They've never grounded themselves in reality. So I don't find that to be a positive. It's very similar to Barbie in the sense that what you see in the film is very much based upon your value system or your preference set. What I saw in the film was this is Wes Anderson's darkest film yet. This is the one that actually takes apart what happened in the 1950s and says even the good or positive aspects of the 1950s are still subliminally or overtly, were already in decay then. And I don't think that's a positive message to point even to the positive aspects of a certain time and place or people and say even if what they had right then was still egregious or damaging or bad. I don't think that's good.
It's fine. You're free to think what you want. I'm just frustrated because part of the thing is I've never once heard you give a positive review of anything. So like
I've talked about John Wick and all that we have actually talked about John Wick.
Oh yeah, John Wick. That was a good movie. Get the fuck out of here. That was trash, dude. It was the most trash movie. I'm watching the movie. I'm thinking, why am I watching this movie?
John Wick?
Yeah, John Wick 4.
Yeah, okay.
The most
John Wick
recent
4
one.
Yeah, but I've talked about many films.
Complete
you want a great film? Go watch Last of the Mohicans. I've actually talked about that a few times.
Well, I wasn't there. I'm sorry. So
Okay,
you get a good review of a movie. Wonderful.
I just did. I just said go watch Last of the Mohicans. It's great. It's one of the best romantic, one of the last romantic films out there.
I just get frustrated sometimes.
What else would you like me to talk about?
I don't care.
Talk about Tron. We talked about Tron last week actually, and how Tron is a great movie. But it's also a film that's not about what you think it's about. Very much so. And Tron Legacy. Tron Legacy is probably up there with one of the most subtly Christian movies out there. You could talk about WALL-E. WALL-E's another great example of that.
WALL-E. Oh, that was a good movie. Yeah, I love WALL-E. Very subtle messaging, especially in Tron Legacy. And the first 6 times I didn't even see it. Then it was like one day, I was like, wait a minute, hold on.
I like Rocky 1. Pretty good one.
Yeah, it's a good feel good individual rules the day sort of movie. Yeah.
It's a love story movie. It's not really about anything other than really, I mean,
I think Rocky's actually about New York. It's about the spirit of New York actually coming back alive after the collapse of the Great Depression, you could say, and then the spirit of New York finally coming back to its feet in the mid '80s. So and then you see that spirit of New York then becomes the spirit of America in number 2, and then it becomes a sort of a Cold War narrative by the third film, because now the spirit of America is now aligned with all on itself. We're going to take this spirit of America out to the world, and we'll combat I think it's the Russian guy in the third film or the fourth one. I can't remember. I think it's the third film.
Well, my battery's dying. I gotta fly.
All right, see you, Chad.
Nice to talk to you.
Wow, Jesse, I don't know if this is good or bad. Benjamin Franklin. Finally, Jesse and I agree on a movie. That Asteroid City is bad. I don't know now. Now I have to watch it to find out if that's good or bad for you.
Actually, maybe that should be our first watch club, Mark. I actually did I ever say the movie was bad? I said I found the film egregious, like I wanted to tear the screen down.
Yeah.
I didn't actually say it was bad. I don't think Wes Anderson has made a bad film. I found what I was trying to point towards, and maybe I'm talking too much with a full belly of coffee now, so I'm a little bit erratic, is that the film has egregious elements in it. in that it never points to a positive aspect. It's actually
Right.
all negative, which is why
Right.
it needs to be in its pastel dream colors.
Mm.
Particularly those stage play scenes there's a lot going on there. I need to watch it again to try and figure out what's exactly being discussed. Again, there's often formal, informal messages happening within films, and you need proper discernment. Often you can only get that with a second viewing. Sometimes you can get it the first viewing. Sometimes you don't want to go back for the second viewing. I particularly would suggest people not do a second viewing of Arlington Road, because then you may actually go out and hurt people after you watch Arlington Road. The one-time viewing of Arlington Road is enough. You can take my Muppet advice on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that film. Well, and that's part of the problem is movies went from being good, wholesome entertainment. Again, you can look at Casablanca, Citizen Kane, and the Maltese Falcon, right? Key Largo, right? And you can say, oh, these are good, wholesome, straightforward, simple messages with no subversion, no undertone, no, everything's laid out. Now, you may not get it all, right? But that's very different from the modern films, especially like The Matrix, where there's layers upon layers upon layers of messaging. And who knows what that's doing to you, right? And that's the real, no, really, these films are having an effect on your interaction with purchasing values. They're having an impact on how you relate to the world, because, look, if you act like all corporations are greedy, then all corporations will become greedy, because people in them will assume that they're acting within a greedy system, and they themselves will get greedy, some of them, or at least enough of them, and that will manifest greedy corporations in the world. So you put out an image and people follow the image because we have a mimicry circuit, and we don't know what we're following necessarily. We think we're in control of ourselves because we're rational beings, which is just ridiculous and false. And so we don't even see that we become the evil we pretend to hate, right? And there's a lot of psychological projection in that, right? There's memes about this now, oh, I know if you're calling me a Nazi, you're the actual Nazi. Well, there's some truth to that in a lot of cases, because it is projection, right? It's projection of your internal state upon the external world. That's how projection works. Projection doesn't work any other way. And so you know something bad about yourself at some unconscious, we'll call it, level, and that's coming out by you casting that badness within yourself onto the outside world and making statements about either what people said when in fact they didn't say them, or what people did when they didn't do them, or how people voted without even knowing how they voted. You're just presuming they voted, and then casting why they voted that way, or why they did that thing, or why they said that thing, right? And now you're 2 layers of abstraction away from reality, right? And then it's just harder to get back to your earlier point. You deal with these layers of abstraction, and it's harder to get back to value, because you learn value through consequence, through participation, through experience with things. And you don't want to get that far away from it by watching movies way too often, for example, or playing video games way too often, or spending all your time with this silly thing, and as featureless as it is, Father Eric's phone is quite handy in a pinch. Could have used my phone and we would have gotten in a pinch, but I left it in the car. So these things happen.
Yeah.
Maps are handy.
Yeah, there's one thing that came up too is maybe I was wrong about The Last Mohicans. Maybe The Patriot is one of the last great films of my preferred genre. Mel Gibson. Patriot is great. I need to rewatch that. One thing that has happened is that people, instead of not to say that books are the be and all end all, but people are learning things about history and culture through a passive medium. You cannot tell me that a book is a passive object. A book is a very active object. You have to read it. You have to dedicate the time and space. You have to use reading comprehension. It is quite an active. You can passively read a book, like a narrative. Yeah, good luck passively reading the Plato and not falling asleep.
Well, look, but and I'm going to do a video on this. I am. It's going to be a lot of work, so I'm not sure when we're going to get to it quite yet. But people are telling you things about Plato's cave they're not just false and wrong and contradicted in the book, but They are based on a bad worldview that this text denies, and not just book 7, which is whatever part 7 of the manuscript, not just the parable of the cave, but like the whole thing, like all the parts of the Republic are very much your scientific materialistic, or the would be ancient Greek philosophical framing, cannot approach justice. It can't get you there. Explicitly, that's actually what the book is about. Virtues and values are not attainable through what ancient Greeks would call philosophy. We would call it science. That's an inversion that we did in recent times, we'll say, scooping up scooping up theologians like Hegel, who didn't think he was a philosopher because that would be silly and he would hate that, and calling them philosophers when no. The ancient Greeks would have been like, yeah, hard no, not a philosopher. And giving people credit where it's not due, like Immanuel Kant or Foucault and Derrida. These people are stupid. I'm sorry, they're dumb. If you actually pay attention to what they're saying, they're morons. They sound like actual 3-year-olds. I have had conversations with 3-year-olds that sound like Immanuel Kant. I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry. But when you project that into the world is important because you overvalued it and other people overvalued it. You end up with perversions. Michelle, my good friend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. In the film Robin Hood Men in Tights, that was a fun movie. The part when Robin Hood tells Little John to stand tall when sinking, and Little John does the same to Robin when he starts to slip and loses balance. A value done with a purpose in a silhouette without forms in silence. Interestingly, a great movie. Thank you again so much for your generous chat. It's a great movie. And part of the reason why it's a great movie is because I think in that era, the way they were sneaking in virtues and values is through the comedies. And that comedy in particular is sort of a double trick, right? Because you're expressing the virtues and values of the original story in a comedy format to get engagement, right? And so in that way, we should, in hindsight, and hindsight only, call it propaganda. And I would make that argument for Tron Legacy too, and I'd make that argument for a bunch of movies. I don't think that's going to work as well as we need it to, for various reasons. But yeah, that's my observation. What do you think, Jesse?
Robin Hood Men in Tights. What I remember about that film is that it actually makes a great case for chastity. It actually makes a fantastic case for chastity, and also the true obligations of what a masculine or what manhood is, which is you should actually put off the chase of a woman, and you should actually make a virtuous quest out of that. The film plays it up as a joke, but it actually, like the Barbie film, reveals something which is true. Not to say it's good, but it's definitely true, which is that, waiting for the right time, you could say, to fully pronounce your love for someone is actually a good. It's a good that you can do in the world. The film makes a mockery out of that. However, it's at least puts the subject on debate.
Right.
Yes, and it's quite clear that the film is doing that in many ways. Yet I would definitely agree with the notion that comedy was one of the big examples where virtues and values were discussed in the you could say the late 70s to start of the 90s. Again, time periods are subject to debate. But there was a string of where the drama became a comedy, or became the preferred style of audiences in that time and place. Again, because there was such a depression, and because there were a lot of The people in that time and place needed messages in that particular way. Now we've had this overindulgence, this realistic, concrete aesthetic where everything's quite rigid, and it's quite a unromantic or unsentimental view of the world. There's going to be some backlash to that, and yeah, I think the danger with Oppenheimer is that that film, it tried to do a sentiment, or put forth sentiments in the world, but it still couldn't shake that sort of brutalist aesthetic, which we've kind of come to see as like, this is what an artistic film is. You know, it has this particular color grade, it has this particular camera angles, this style of music. It can be quite long, quite withdrawn out.
Right.
Yeah, that's a style of film. That's a style of storytelling.
Right.
That is
Well,
not
and they're
the medium
trying-
itself. And so a
they're
whole
trying
generation
to-
has gotten too used to a style of storytelling or a style of
Right.
aesthetic and
Right.
assume that's the medium rather than it's the message. So it
Right.
kind of
Well,
makes
and that's the problem, right? Is that they're trying to emulate quality with quantity, right? They're trying to use a pattern, right? Which is inevitable. Like, people are going to follow patterns. They don't have much of a choice. People are stupid, so you're going to copy something. But they're trying to substitute the quality for the pattern, or trying to make the quality emerge from the pattern, right? And then you get these formulas that are supposed to evoke whatever, right? That's the destruction of. Critical Drinker does a good job of talking about this. That's the destruction of the superhero genre, right? It was just this overused trope of, this is how we do this. And then it lost the flavor of the early films. And I don't think anybody does a good job of talking about the flavor of the early films, and why it's different and what makes it different, how it's different, right? Because I think it's A, hard to talk about, but B, it strays into the territory that Plato actually goes into quite a bit in the Republic, which is the religious. He talks about the gods all over the damn place in the book. Like, it's all over. It's literally everywhere. And no one ever mentions that. Isn't that weird? But this is our recent lensing, right? The age of gnosis lensing, where we're casting some fantasy about Plato's cave being a triumph of the individual, when it's anything but. It is the exact polar opposite of that. You are born into chains in the cave, and no one ever gets out of those chains. No one is even capable of breaking free from the chains. Plato actually says that.
Yeah, maybe a final thought there on that particular thing is, in the middle of the 19th century, there was this big boom on this concept called archetypes. Archetypes were kind of used as a stand-in for people of character, or gods in the lower G pagan sense. Something that had a virtue or a value or a sentiment or a particular aesthetic or energy, a pattern, you could say, as well, that was recognizable. You could be, Dionysian, a Apollonian, a Mars, Venus. We could go on and on. A Zeus or Thor. That was kind of distilled down into, personality. That personality is now Captain Marvel, because it's, this is how we should see America, rather than seeing America as this distinct type of tradition and characters and archetypes and different patterns of different stories that kind of got, again, squashed down into a personality. And personalities are very different, because personalities are unreliable by definition. You can be a personality is fluid, whereas a character is something that should be stable. You either have the character, you either are patient, or you are not patient. Like, there is no in between with
Well, then they're universals, and that's the flattening of the world, the reduction and compression of the world through the psychological, which is attempting to be a science, but actually isn't and can't be, by the way, different subject. When you put that lens on, you end up with these problems. Then you disembody the lower G gods, right, which are virtues and values. You flatten the world because they're disembodied. Then you have to put them somewhere, and then you end up with superhero films. And you never, even with that, you never quite get to values. And so that's the problem, is that it's this struggle with, where are the values? Where is value? that you see unfold in the art over and over again, right? And there's several simultaneous waves coming through, right? And that's where people get confused because they see, oh, well, it's not true here, but it's true here. And they don't realize, yeah, those are different waves, different threads that are going in parallel because the world is huge. It's not all going in one place at one time. And the globalists are attempting to make it, right? We've got the one set of values. You're going to eat the bugs. You're going to own nothing. You're going to be happy. And like happiness is something to strive for. Like happiness is a gift. And that's a different attitude. What you should be is content. Contentedness that's the thing to strive for, right? And you can't have contentedness without struggle, right? And you can't have struggle without values, because without values, none of this framing works. And we've lost that sense of values. On the note of the loss of sense of values, Jesse, since it's about 3 hours, so we need to wrap it up. How would you like to wrap up?
Oh, okay, so maybe pointing people to consider what they value, and what they give their time, energy, and attention to. So, can you think of a cultural work other than Spider-Man that has put forth a quote as something that you can aspire to in a piece of media? After Spider-Man in 2001, the quote is, "With great power comes great responsibility." Can you think of anything else outside of that from this time period onwards that should give you notice to what's being valued and devalued in the world? How do you trace the steps back from that? You have to find something to aspire to. You have to find someone to aspire to be like. And within that, I would say be more holy in both senses of that word.
Wow. Well, just before we run, I have to cover Alex. Hi, I was in church and I saw a list of things for the kids to do, and each item was connected to a value. If they're good, they get fake money, and that money can be used to get rewards. I saw the list and thought about you because there were a lot of important details. The best part was that the participation and listening were listed as $1 rewards. High order participation was $5. That's fascinating. And I think that's the thing. When you're looking for value, or when you're looking at value, or when you're dealing with value, you have to understand that the thing that you're doing is not the value. The value comes from your participation with the thing, right? It comes as the result of your attraction. So the value attracts you, you participate, you increase the value or decrease the value depending upon your mode of participation. And because there's not one value, you can end up playing video games all day. Or you could end up writing a Substack. Or you could end up doing a live stream on Friday nights. All right. These values are not equal. And you have to discipline yourself to some extent, not only to find value, where is the value, but to manifest that value in a generative fashion. And that's the key. Again, I put it in the live chat, the live stream on generative, because it's important. It's important to understand that the things that you're generating are linked in with value, first by your attraction to them, and second by your participation in them. And so think about that, right? Think about that very carefully, because there's lots of things you can do. So you just have to jiggle around the values, because they do compete in conflict. And on that note, hopefully I'll see everybody next week. I plan on doing this next week. Unless something comes up, I should be here. We'll figure out a topic. And thank you very much for your participation. I do value it. And the value that you give to me encourages me to learn to draw better. I got this diamond. It's not bad. I'm not unhappy with it. And we'll do it all again next week. And hopefully we'll get even more value out. So have a good week, everybody. It's lovely to